In this session, we'll discuss setup of the Accounts Receivable accounting options. We can access this setup window by selecting Accounts Receivable from the Setup Accounting Options menu, or by right-clicking on the Accounts Receivable menu icon and selecting the Setup option. Here we are asked for some general ledger accounts. These include settings for accounts receivable, retention receivable, and cash receipts. This would be our normal checking account where most cash receipts are deposited. Also, a sales income account for income from non-job invoices and a job income account for income from job progress billings. These two accounts are for maintaining a balance between your job cost ledger and your general ledger. They include the closed job income account and the prior year job income account. We also have a freight income account, miscellaneous income account, discounts allowed account, should we offer discounts, and sales tax payable account, should we collect sales tax. The GST is for collected value-added tax amounts. This is most commonly used by Canadian companies. We can also specify a finance charge income account, a bad debt account, and a credit card fees collected account. On the next tab, we have some miscellaneous questions about accounts receivable. These next settings apply to the invoice entry process. If this box is checked, the system will automatically assign an invoice number during invoice entry, starting with the number shown here. Here, we can indicate whether the program should ask for a sales level when we enter trade invoices. This feature will be covered in another training session on using the item price file. If this box is checked, the system will remind the operator that they have just entered a prepaid invoice. If this box is checked, the system will check the invoice history file for duplicate invoice numbers during invoice entry. If this box is checked, the system will allow the operator to enter different income accounts on different line items in trade invoice entry. Here you can enter a minimum amount for finance charge billings. If the system attempts to create a finance charge billing for a customer, and the amount of the finance charge is less than the amount entered here, the system will skip the creation of that finance charge invoice. If this box is checked, when the OK button is pressed during trade invoice entry and the job ID field has been left blank, the system will warn the user. When line items on a time and material invoice are created, if this box is checked, the system will allow the user to look up individual cost codes for each line item. When a trade invoice is created from the contractor draw procedure, that trade invoice will have one line item for each scheduled value on the draw. When this invoice is printed out or viewed in trade invoice entry, the normal column headings such as item ID, description, quantity, unit price, and amount may not be representative of the true nature of the invoice. If this box is checked, the system will display the line items on the screen and print them on the invoice with more appropriate column headings, including contract amount, prior billed percent, current percent billed, total percent billed, and amount. The system now asks whether invoice line items should be posted in summary. Normally, the program will post one general ledger transaction for each line item entered on an accounts receivable invoice. If this box is checked, the program will summarize invoice line items which are charged to identical general ledger accounts into a common general ledger transaction. This button is for the GST, or Goods and Service Tax. This tax is used by Canadian companies, but it can be tailored here to be used for any value-added tax requirement. Click the button and you can change the name and abbreviation of the tax for system display and reporting purposes. The sales tax rate is the default rate that will be assigned to new customers when they are added to the system. This sales tax rate will be placed in their file and can be modified there. Here we have a button which allows us to set up a series of sales tax codes. When we click this button, the following screen comes into view. Displayed is a list box containing sales tax codes. To insert a new code, we click on the Insert button. We can now give this tax code an identification. We will identify our tax code as OR125, and the description is Oregon, Portland area. We now specify the different tax rates that will be charged when this tax code is attached to an accounts receivable invoice. First, we can select the state tax. We will select the state of Oregon and indicate that the Oregon state tax is 5%. Now we can specify up to 4 different local taxes which are included in this tax code. We will insert one with an ID of POR for Portland with a tax rate of 1.25%. Now we see that our tax code, which represents the state of Oregon in the Portland area, with a 5% tax rate for the state and a 1.25% tax rate for the city of Portland, which adds up to a 6.25% tax, which will be charged on any invoices which contain this tax code. If this box is checked, then individual line items on printed invoices that are taxable will include the letter T next to the line item. This section refers to changes made to records in the customer file. The program has the ability to store a note detailing what changes are made to customer records. Using this setting, indicate whether you wish the program to create these notes, and whether you want the user to be given the option whether to create the note or not each time they make a change to a customer record. This section of the screen is the aging periods we wish to see on our accounts receivable aging report. Usually these are 30, 60, 90 days, and so on. Now we'll go to the next tab. Click this button and use the Browse list to select an invoice printing format. If you've purchased FormMaker, you can select a customized invoice format. The process of designing FormMaker forms, of course, is covered in a separate training session. If you do select FormMaker as the invoice format, you must specify the file name for your desired invoice printing program. If a standard laser invoice format is selected, you can specify a logo to be printed on the invoice. Click on the Logo Setup button, and this window is displayed. Here you can indicate whether a logo should be placed in the upper left-hand corner of the invoice form. Click this button to select a logo image file. If your logo image file does not contain the company name and address, select Logo and Company Information. The system will print your logo to the left of the company name and address block. If your logo image does contain the company name and address, select this option. The system will replace the normal company name and address block with your logo file. You can increase or decrease the printed logo size using this setting. In this field, you can add a default memo. This memo will be added to every invoice that you create in the invoice entry procedure. At that point, you can change the memo to something else or add to it for each individual invoice. Here you can specify the number of decimal places for the tax percent at the bottom of your printed invoice. Here you can instruct the program to print multiple copies of your invoice. If you select more than one, the system lets you supply a label for each copy. This label will be printed on the invoice copy. Here we can include some default information to be used when we send an email with an invoice attached. Use these checkboxes to indicate which phone numbers will be included in the company and customer address blocks on the printed invoice. Now select the desired statement format.
If you select FormMaker as the statement format, you must supply the file name of your desired statement printing program here. If you pick the standard format, you can use the logo button to include your logo on the statement in the same way you selected a logo for the invoice form. Once again, you can specify which phone numbers will be included on the statement and set up default information for emails with attached customer statements. On the last tab, you can enter default settings for new customers. This checkbox refers to the customer ID number that will be assigned to new customers added to the system. Traditionally, the system is always just assigned the next available ID number, that is, the highest customer number in the file plus 1. However, over time you may delete little used customers from the file, or you may assign a customer number that is much higher than the next available number. This would leave gaps in the assigned customer numbers. If this box is checked, the default customer ID will be the highest plus 1. If it's not checked, the system will start at number 1 and search for the first unused customer ID number. That will be the number for the new customer, unless you change it. Also, the customer number field, when inserting a new customer, will appear as a drop-down list box. The entries in the box represent all of the unused and available customer numbers. The last number in the list will be the highest plus 1. You can select a customer ID from the list box, or select Higher and type in a customer ID number.
This default finance charge rate is a default that will be placed in each newly entered customer's file. Here, you can enter the default due terms and discount terms for entry of new customers into the system. This means whenever we enter a brand new customer into the system, these items will be inserted into the customer file by default. We have a description of the due terms, and we have a calculation which indicates whether the due date will be calculated based on a certain day of the month or a certain number of days from the invoice date. The same thing holds true with discount terms for new customers. Here we enter the discount due terms and rates, and whenever we enter a new customer, these will become the defaults. There may be times when you wish to change some of the default settings for a group of customers. Click this button, and you can force the defaults you have entered to be copied to all your customers, or just to a specific group of customers. Just pick which defaults you wish to force and which customers should receive the new settings. This concludes this training session on setting up accounts receivable accounting options.